Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to allow people to come on into the session and then we will get started. So we'll wait about 2 or 3 minutes. We have people jumping on in here. So get comfortable. Maybe even grab a notepad. I'm sure there will be a lot of great information shared. All right, good evening and welcome to Navigating COVID-19, our mental health and awareness session. My name is Shawnee Blevins. I am the current president of the National Association of Black Accountants, San Francisco chapter, also known as NABA-SF. Founded in 1969, we are a nonprofit membership association dedicated to bridging the opportunity gaps for Black professionals in the accounting, finance, and business-related professions. Many of you have joined several of our past Navigating COVID-19 webinars. And although we've covered several very important topics, today's webinar is focused on a critical topic that has often been considered as taboo within the Black community. And that topic is mental health. Trauma. Trauma is the experience of severe psychological distress following any terrible or life-threatening incident. The unrelenting stories or series of events that Black Americans have witnessed before and after the killing of George Floyd is racial trauma. At its core, racial trauma is racism. Racism takes on 3 forms, each of which is a chronic stressor. Systematic racism is experienced when ideologies, institutions, and policies operate to produce racial and ethnic inequalities. Interpersonal racism involves 2 or more people and can be manifested through bigotry, bias, prejudice, and microaggressions. Internalized racism is the acceptance of negative stereotypes and societal beliefs about one's racial group. Most Black Americans, regardless of education, socioeconomic status, or job title, experience 1 or more forms of racism each and every day. But with the placement of a knee on George Floyd's neck, racism shifted from a chronic stressor to a traumatic trigger. Now, although many of us are well versed in the Black American experience and are constantly reminded that Ahmaud, Breonna, and George were not the first, but a continuation of the trauma that has been experienced by Black Americans. Emotionally and mentally, we are not okay. I am not okay. And there is no shame in admitting that. Admission is a step in the right direction. Admission is acknowledgement of the seemingly never-ending emotional roller coaster that many of us feel that we've been forced into. And although the emotions will remain, understanding the importance of acknowledging and fully experiencing those emotions, while also learning to navigate those emotions, is of the utmost importance to your mental health. Today, we will discuss how the accumulation of centuries of traumatic racial and related inequities, the repeated traumatic scenes of killings of unarmed Black people like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, on top of the racially disparate tolls of the COVID-19 pandemic, have all led to the brewing volcanoes of protests that erupted within the communities across the world. Racial and related inequities have immensely traumatized Black and brown citizens of the United States for centuries. According to the Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health, Black Americans are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems than the general population. All right, so before we jump in, let's clear up a few housekeeping items. The first is, let's have a quick look at the agenda. So once we conclude the NABA welcome, I will introduce you to Ms. Venetia Kurd from Kaiser Permanente. Venetia will have about 30 minutes or so for her presentation, which will then be followed by a Q&A session, followed by closing remarks, resources, and the events that are coming up for NABA SF. While we are accepting questions, I want to make sure that you all are aware that we are utilizing the Q&A feature, which can be found at the very bottom of your screen, labeled Q&A. Please, throughout the presentation, if an idea or a question or a topic comes up, please submit it using the Q&A session, because that is how we will track and respond to all questions throughout the session. At this time, I would like to introduce you to Kaiser Research Associate, Ms. Venetia Kurd. Venetia is an Oakland native. She earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology and recently earned a Master's of Social Work, focusing in both clinical social work and child welfare from San Francisco State University. Go Gators! Venetia has worked with families in both Contra Costa and Alameda County, and we are appreciative that she would take the time out this evening to share with us the importance of mental health. Venetia, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who's joining with us this evening. So tonight we're going to discuss a little bit about maintaining professionalism while coping with loss and community unrest, which is something that's surrounding all of us, from COVID pandemic to the protests that are going on, to the continuous murders that to some people it's new news, but I know to many of us it's something that we have been exposed to and we have been aware of for quite some time. And so, as it was mentioned in Shani's welcome, continuously being bombarded with these negative images, news stories, it has a negative effect on our mental health. So I'm going to do my best to not bombard you guys with more negativity, but instead, I'm just going to propose some ways that we can counter this, that we can work to maintain professionalism while navigating these systems that many of us are a part of, and how to protect our peace and to protect our space while we're out in the public, whether it's with work, family, friends, in your personal time, or when you're in the office. So as we go about, I'm going to address some of these things by starting off with a little self-awareness. We'll talk about setting boundaries and an effort to help maintain and promote our ability to remain professional. We'll talk a little bit about the current climate, the potential effects that this climate can have on our health and our well-being. And then I'll propose some coping strategies that can hopefully help us out through this time. So in an effort to be a little bit more self-aware, I ask that each of you who are joining us this evening, that you can just take a moment and just pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're holding any tension in your body, whether you're looking at your computer screen with your hands clenched together, your jaws clenched, there's tension in your feet and your back, I ask that you just take a moment, you take a deep breath, and you just release that tension that you're holding in your body. And as you release the tension from your body, I ask that you take a moment to just briefly reflect on your day. Take a moment and think about the things that may not have went so well for you today. Whether you went into the office or you worked from the living room or you were in a meeting while in the car, just take a moment and reflect back on your day. And as you're thinking, ask that you embrace the things that did work well for you today and that did work in your favor. And to the best of your ability, as we're here this evening, I ask that you clear your mind and that you be mentally and physically present with us. And as she stated, you guys can share any questions that you may have in the Q&A section. And as we talk tonight, this is a safe space where we are going to discuss some issues that do affect our community. And as I said, hopefully propose some strategies and some resources that can help us counter and deal with these things. Okay. So in regards to setting boundaries, so boundaries can be helpful in our workplace, in our school environment, between our family, if you're working directly with clients. And I think one of the most important areas of our life to establish boundaries is with ourselves. Before we can establish boundaries with anyone else, it's important that we establish boundaries with ourselves, whether that's saying no, deciding what we will and will not stand for within a day. If it's giving yourself a schedule, putting your phone on do not disturb, deciding that, you know what, I'm not going to do social media today. I'm not going to engage with that negative person. And just in regards to what's going on today, limit your time that you're spending watching the news, listening to the news, and just taking in certain media that's out there in a way that can be a method of establishing boundaries. I even have on there, even in traffic, even though it's not as bad as it has been. In regards to establishing boundaries, some of the good things about it is that it allows us and it promotes stability, which is something that has been at risk for many people with the fear of COVID, not knowing if people around you are affected. It's been a lot of things going on with the Karens, trying to just go to the store, pick up the things that you need. You don't know what that trip is going to be like each time we're leaving out the house. In addition to promoting stability, establishing boundaries also help and work as a guideline for us as we're going about our day. As I said, it can be as simple as just saying no, putting your phone on do not disturb. And so a few moments ago, I asked you to take a moment and just acknowledge yourself. And in part because once you become aware of yourself, it becomes a lot easier for us to establish these boundaries. And so I say, for example, thinking of what did not go well today, as you reflect on that experience that you may or may not have, it allows you to implement changes to ensure that tomorrow is a little bit better. In contrast to not setting boundaries and allowing whatever negative experience you may have had today, instead of allowing it to manifest itself and to potentially become dysfunction, I ask that you reflect on it and think of ways to make it better, because it's so easy for us to adapt to dysfunction and to make it a part of our everyday life. And with the presence of such historical trauma and navigating the systemic racism that exists, a lot of people have unconsciously adapted to dysfunction. And so something as simple as putting your phone on do not disturb or telling someone no, it may not be able to counter that, but it is an effort in taking small and baby steps to overcome many of the challenges that we have to face day to day. Okay. Okay. And so with our current climate and everything that's going on in regards to COVID, so currently within Alameda County, there's about 45 to 55% of the people who are diagnosed with COVID, they have mild to no symptoms. And so for some of us navigating our everyday life, that is a little bit scary, because if you're within Alameda County, and as many of us know, we live in one county, we work somewhere else, we're constantly commuting and moving around. Even during our current climate, there's many of us who are still moving about. There's a 45 to 55% chance that you may come in contact with someone. And so that is a fear that for some people, they're content with. But for other people, it does ignite heightened emotion and worry. And about 60% of the people within Alameda County who are being diagnosed are between the ages of 18 and 49, which are all working age people. And so these are people who may still be coming to the office, who may still be coming into your grocery stores, who can still be serving you, even at the little walk-up windows that you're going to or may not be going to. But these are people that we come in contact with every single day. And so just to connect it a little bit with establishing boundaries in an effort to just counter some of these fears that some people may have and these constant worries, I just ask that each day as we're getting up and we're going about our day, that you start your day and you determine and you set what it is you're willing to accept from people and those around you. So in regards to COVID, whether or not you wear a mask or you're taking the CDC and things of that nature, you can still take steps to protect yourself personally. And with that, by setting boundaries. And so also within Alameda County, since the shelter in place has started, the Crisis Support Center of Alameda County has experienced a 50% increase in calls. And so a lot of that, it comes with heightened amount of fear, worry, and instability that many people are facing. And so for some folks who may not be aware, the Crisis Support of Alameda County, they provide support to persons who are in the midst of crisis. And one of their big goals is to prevent suicide, and they have 24-hour crisis support and provide access to a suicide prevention line. So with that being said, I know that it is something that within our community, we're often reluctant to seek out these resources despite being faced and being in the midst of constant chaos and potential crisis. So I just say that to say that it is a resource that is out there. It is something that people are utilizing. So I do encourage you guys to look at that. During this presentation, so I have very few statistics, and in part because, as we mentioned before, I don't want to just bombard you guys with a lot of dysfunction and negative news. As many of us know that purely being of African descent, the odds are stacked against us. And it is known that hearing such news and seeing it, it does have a negative effect on our mental outcome, our morale, our ability to connect and talk with one another. And the things that are stacked against us, oftentimes it is things that are out of our control. And unfortunately, it is because of our skin color, our national origin, the way we may talk, the zip code that we may live in. And then a lot of times those are things that we cannot control. So I do not want to bombard us with those statistics. But with that being said, in 2008, about 11.5% of Black adults in the US did not have any form of health insurance. And lack of access to health insurance, it is one of many barriers that prevent African Americans from seeking and accessing mental health care. So that is one of the reasons I also shared the Alameda County Crisis Support resource with you guys, because regardless of you or someone you know do not have access to comprehensive health care, there are resources and there are outlets available to help debrief and to just cope and to obtain an understanding of what is going on around us, whether it be stress from our current events or just stress from work. Across the people that we have to interact with in the office, there are resources and things that are available to help with that. In addition, so I also encourage people to utilize these resources and to seek them out, because at the moment, there are a significant number of people of African descent who choose not to acknowledge mental health conditions, and they do not seek out support for mental health conditions because it is seen, and it's a misconception that it is a weakness. And so I just would like to just reiterate that it is not a weakness. There are resources available, and that this is something that there is a stigma associated with mental illness and having to seek help and not being able to handle it on your own. And to the best of my ability, and just encourage you guys that this is a false narrative, that is not something that we need to internalize, and it is something that as a community we can actively eliminate. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's going on with our community. So another reason I'm going to refrain from going into too much detail in regards to some of the negative things that have been portrayed in the media is that it is also known that being exposed to the unjustified murders, it is likely to promote mental illness in persons of African descent. And a lot of times these symptoms onset is very latent. So you're likely to see or have effects of this 1 to 2 months afterwards. And so what this may look like for people, it can really vary from having difficulty sleeping, increase back to like the dysfunctional behavior that many people easily adapt to during this time. It can be heightened. These murders and the things that's going on in the media, it particularly has an effect, or according to research, it has an effect on African Americans in a way that it does not affect other groups of people. And so on the next slide, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of those potential effects or what that can look like. And so with the instability that many people are facing during this time, increased worry in regards to our finance, our work, if there's people who have been facing financial instability because of this current crisis, whether it's you do not feel safe leaving work. Just to say, I've had friends who had to advocate to not have the night shift because of what's going on. And it's like, we should not have to choose between earning a living and our safety. Like, those are two basic rights that all people should have access to. And as we know, unfortunately, it is not the case. We may experience changes in our eating and sleeping habits, whether from sleeping more, having difficulty getting to sleep from your mind racing, or sometimes some of us are sleeping more in an effort to escape the things that are going on. And the same can be said with our eating habits. I can say for myself, my eating has been off the wall from working at home and waking up at 7:30, logging onto Zoom, and then realizing, wait a minute, I don't need to have this hearty breakfast because I'm not leaving my house. And then just dealing with that. With the changes, our body physically is adapting to what is going on. Our mental state is constantly adapting. And sometimes those two can be on two different pages, even though they're heavily dependent on one another. So our external environment has a huge impact on what happens with us internally. So as I mentioned, sleeping, the same can be said for concentrating. And I just hope that you guys are still concentrating, still here with us now. But if not, it's understandable given what's going on and the things that are around us. You can see an increase or exacerbation of chronic health conditions. The same can be said for mental health conditions. And so with that, one example that I have is that during this time, I've seen an increase in hoarding. So I don't know if you guys know of anyone, but if you think of a relative or a friend or acquaintance who typically go to the store and always buy maybe two packages of soap, 2 6-packs of soap, 2 body washes, or if they're a Costco shopper and they usually get the 17 rolls of tissue or the multi-pack. I've seen a lot of people who are now doubling that up because of fear, because of the instability. They don't know if the person who usually takes them to the store will be able to take them anymore. So I see a lot of people hoarding essential supplies, outside of the things that we see on TV with the people like taking all the toilet tissue and things like that, but that could be contributed. But with the hoarding and the mental health conditions that I personally have seen kind of exacerbated during this time, a lot of it's people's way of coping and adapting to the changes and the instability. So just to take it back a little bit with what I said about boundaries and how it can possibly help with mental health conditions and just our overall mental state in regards to thinking about setting boundaries. And I'll continue with the example of like hoarding and just over shopping during this time. I would say it's really important to tap into your social support if you do have people around you, to do little things, whether it's making a list of what it is that you're going after for the day, whether you're going to the store, you're running errands, you're going to work. Make a list and to the best of your ability, stick with it. Because there's just a lot and it's really easy to get derailed during these times. The same can be said with increased use of legal and illegal substance, whether it's through drugs use or maybe prior to shelter in place, you'll have your 1 cup of coffee and now you find yourself having 3 just because you're in the house. Even though coffee is a legal substance, it is still a substance that in excess can also have negative effects. And with that as well, I would say fatigue. And with myself, the biggest thing I have been facing is this racial conversation fatigue and with people who are seeming to just discover Black people. And it's a little disheartening and it's a little bit hurtful that it took the public recognition of multiple murders that, to contrary beliefs, all these murders were actually a couple months apart, but for whatever reason, they all hit the media at the same time, in addition to the incidents involving Target across the nation. That it took all of these incidents, and I would say more so, I feel like it was the looting of Target that really got people's attention to notice Black people and to know what's going on. And for me, it's most hurtful because we always hear the saying, or people would say with good intentions, that I don't see color. But to me personally, and I'm one of those people who, whenever I hear that, like, I call people out on it. And I let you know, for you to sit here and say that you do not see color, it means that you do not see me. And I can say that is the same for all people. I would say all non-white passing people, that whether it's the pronunciation of your name, the clothes that you wear, the way that you wear your hair, even it could be as small as your penmanship. That has been something that has just really came to light, that, like, I know people say in social circles, oh, I don't see color, I see everybody the same. But with this new series of events, I'm just kind of like, dang, these people really did not see color, and they really did not see us, and they really did not know that we exist. And it is nice that to, you know, be recognized finally. But it's also a little hurtful, and it's something that for a couple weeks I just had to really tap out of. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who grew a little fatigued with the things that were happening, and the social circles and the people who had good intentions, whose conversations did not always go the way that they planned. And again, this is something that we can face every day, and that can happen in regular conversations, and that could have been present in our lives prior to the shelter in place. But I'm more so bringing it up now because I know it is something that is heightened and that more people are experiencing with everything that's going on, whether it's in your workplace or your social circles outside of work. Okay, and so just in an effort to kind of counter or to cope with some of the things that many people are facing during this time, I strongly encourage people to acknowledge their feelings. We're bombarded with an array of emotions, whether from the moment that we open our eyes sometimes in the morning, from fear to excessive joy to being happy to seeing our people unite and come together. I know for some people, Juneteenth was like a new thing, and it was still nice just to see Black people having a holiday and everyone being in unison, like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're celebrating, regardless of if it was your first year or you've been celebrating it. We have those feelings of joy, but then we may also be bombarded with feelings of sadness that, like, again, all these people had to be killed, people had to lose their jobs, we had to see these things on TV in order for us to come together and have this celebration. So I just say, whatever it is that you may be feeling, acknowledge it and sit with it for a minute and analyze it and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? And if you have to verbally ask yourself, do that. Sit in front of a mirror and take the time to get to know yourself. And again, just as I started with, kind of doubling back with self-awareness, as you know yourself, as you become aware of your emotions and what you have going, it does become a lot easier to set boundaries. And in connection to just remaining professional and in applying this to our workplace, a lot of us go into these institutions and we work in these environments that were never meant for us. So it is difficult. But I encourage people to get to know themselves, because once you know you, it's a lot easier for you to establish boundaries and for you to set a standard for how other people treat you. When you come into work in the morning, or before you get into work, set a standard and determine what it is that you want to take in that day. If you don't want to hear the person coming to you in the break room talking about Donald Trump and talking about the news, I guarantee that if you make that decision at the beginning of your day, it will be a lot easier to walk away from that person at the sink and still remain professional. Hey, I've had it rough this week. This is not something I want to talk about. I do appreciate you coming to me, but this is not something I want to talk about. And we often have a hard time saying no and walking away from that. But I just encourage you, it's not something that happens overnight, but if you start in the morning, it'll be a little bit easier at the middle of the day. And the same thing can be said for these Zoom calls and these Zoom meetings. Tap into the chat and say, hey, this is a nice conversation, but mentally I'm not here for it. I'm turning off my camera for a few minutes. I'm turning down the volume. I'm stepping away, and I'll be right back. Set these standards, acknowledge how you feel, and move forward with them. But with that being said, not to kind of not to play devil's advocate, I also do not advocate to act off of emotion. And I hope that I'm able to distinguish and make that clear when acknowledging your emotions and seeing how you feel and moving forward, but do not allow your emotions to be the sole thing that you use to make judgment and to move forward. Now, I hope that makes sense. And so as I previously mentioned earlier, monitor and reduce your consumption, whether it's your conversation with people, your social media, your family, your friends, your colleagues, your coworkers, your work. During this time, many people are still working. We still have assignments. We still have tasks. We still need to engage with clients, participants, patients, whatever it may be. And if you find yourself in a place that mentally or physically you do not feel that that's something you're able to take in, advocate for yourself. I think oftentimes we're afraid to speak up out of fear of being that angry Black person, that defiant Black person, that person who don't want to follow the rules. But I think more so in this time more than ever, it's really important that we protect our peace and that we advocate for ourselves and that we take control over what we let in and out of our mind and within our space. With that again, allocating time. So that I think that can kind of go hand in hand with monitoring, reducing consumption. So you can say, you know, I'm going to set aside 10 minutes to have this race talk with people. Whoever taps in with me first, that's my 10 minutes for the day. And after that, I'm done. Allocate your work time. I'm giving this much time to this project, to this person. If it's TV, if it's the news, you have the right to do that. And I just say, be mindful and be conscious of what you let into your space. And if you have support systems, I encourage people to tap into that. But I also think it's important to recognize that having a support system is a privilege that not everyone has. So not everyone has a good friend that they can talk to, a sibling, a relative that they can go to. So that's also why I do encourage people to tap into the social resources that are available within our community, whether you're calling a hotline or you're doing something anonymous, you're using the internet. During this time of the shelter in place, there's been a lot of pros and cons where we actually have access to more resources. So I do not want support system I do not want it to be interpreted as it's just your friends or physical support system, because it could be online resources. You can go out and, well, maybe not with social distancing, but you can even go out and meet new people that you feel that you can just vent and talk with. And it does not have to be a permanent system that you hold on to. But if you have access to something in the moment, I encourage people to take advantage of it. With that as well, I also encourage people to practice acceptance, whether it be radical acceptance, where you sit with yourself and you accept the things that you cannot change. And so if any of you had a moment like that today when you were reflecting on the things that did not go well for you, whether it was just a particular scenario or experience, I encourage people to accept those things. Do not beat yourself up over it. Do not overconsume. Do not allow these things to overconsume yourself. And so just for example, if it's your work environment and it's a coworker who had non-preferred contact with you, whether they mispronounce your name, they're constantly talking to you about race, you cannot control other people's actions and you cannot control them, but you do have control over yourself. So rather than sitting and reflecting on what X, Y, and Z did, I don't like what she said to me, this person made me mad, why are they always coming to me with this? Except that's who they are, that's what they do, that's what they come with, but what can you do? What can you do to make changes. And again, just going back to protecting your peace. And I think the same thing can be said in regards to a lot of fears and worries associated with COVID, the shelter in place. We want things to be open. Full disclosure, pretty vain. Like, I've been working on it. I've been sad that it's the 7th month and I haven't been able to get my hair done. Like, that's been one of my radical acceptances that I'm making peace with. But rather than focusing on all these external things that I do not have control over, what can I do? What can I do to change my mood, to change my mindset, to improve the environment that is around me? Okay. And so another simple one that you can do anywhere, in your car, out. You can even do it while somebody's talking to you and you could just zone out for a little bit. I do always encourage deep breathing just to sometimes reset our mind. And so one particular breathing pattern that I like to use is breathing in for 5 seconds, holding it for 3, and then breathing out for 7. So it's a 5-3-7. And so a lot of times people recommend mindfulness, but I know even for myself, mindfulness is sometimes hard when my mind is racing and there's so much going on around me. So I encourage people that even when you're doing breathing or in some sense mindfulness, don't be afraid to count out loud. And if somebody's close by you, this might be the thing to help get them away. They'll be like, don't talk to them. They like to count out loud. That's okay. Stay away from me when I'm doing it. Okay. But that's just another technique. As I kind of mentioned earlier, your mind over your emotions and just establishing that boundary, because sometimes our emotions dictate our mind. And so it's kind of a juggle balancing act. And then I will also say practicing mental reframing, which goes a little bit with radical and just accepting things for what they are. Do not, as I said, beat yourself up. Change your mindset and change how you're looking at things. And a big one going back that plagues a lot of us is the racial injustice. A lot of us are frustrated and we are angry because we feel like we have the answers and it is so simple. And you may be getting involved and attending these meetings and you're signing the petitions. And it's like you're doing all these things, but we're not seeing the change that we want to see. That's just another one. Do not hold yourself accountable. Do not beat yourself up over it. There's a lot of us that want to see changes. And I think it's just also important to recognize that the changes that many of us want to see and want to implement, whether it's in the healthcare system, the judicial system, the court system, the education system, none of these injustices were put in place overnight. So it is something that definitely takes time. But with that being said, I don't want to discourage anyone. Keep running and fighting your race. But just be aware and take care of yourself in that process. And so with that, as well with taking care of yourself, I just wanted to share with folks that, so this here is a list of COVID sites, testing sites that are available within Alameda County. There's an array of them from Tri-Valley, Livermore, Pleasanton area, Richmond, Union City, Fremont, down to that area. But that's just, I just encourage people to tap into the resources that are available and to have those difficult conversations with yourself. Because oftentimes we go into these places and we don't see people that look like us. We do have to advocate a little bit harder to get the care that we need. But I just encourage people to take that fight and take that move in an effort to better protect yourself.
All right. Thank you, Venetia. That was so informative. Again, we are so grateful that you took the time out to come and sit with us. So at this point, we are going to move into our Q&A session. Hopefully, if you have come up with some questions, you were able to submit them using the Q&A feature at the very bottom of your screen. It is not too late. If you do have questions, please continue to submit them. Andrea, can we have you read the questions for us?
Sure. So the first question that we have comes from Dr. Melba, and she asks, what suggestions do you have for the lack of sleep and concentration, please? You're on mute.
You're muted, Venetia.
Okay, sorry about that. I forgot I muted myself. So for myself, I'm really big on utilizing just natural remedies. But even during this time, some of them have been a little bit hard. So I would say at the beginning of your day, establishing what time it is that you want to be in bed, and doing what you need to do to ensure that you're able to make that bedtime. And it sounds a little crazy because I'm sure we're all adults and it's like a bedtime. But it's definitely one of those things that for myself, I have found helpful and sticking to it. If it's 10 o'clock, once 10 o'clock come, whatever's done is not going to get done. And just being really consistent with yourself. And once 10 o'clock come and you do decide to get in bed, do not allow your mind to continue racing on the things that you did not do for that day or you did not get to. So I do my best to try and think positive and to do that mental reframing. So instead, I've just been fulfilling myself with, okay, tomorrow, this is what I will do, and just set the tone that it will get done rather than beating myself up over what I did not do for that day. But then in regards to the natural, chamomile tea is usually good. I did melatonin for a little bit, which is all natural, not anything medical. And then there's a handful of free meditation apps and things like that. Most people, if you have access to a smartphone, smartwatch, there are free meditation samples that are in there. And something that I've been noticing, there has been a lot more Black voices in these apps. So like I use Fitbit. I know that there's one through Kaiser, and I've been finding like more voices. So just utilizing those, using nature sounds, whether it be water, the rainforest, the beach, calm headspace. Yeah, those are definitely, Alexa. Yeah, so the chat has some good suggestions, some of which I have used, but just utilizing shutting down your brain because it's hard. But I would say for me, that's what has been helpful.
Thank you for that question. Nicole Felix asked a question or maybe a statement. In the example of educating allies or microaggressions, what are some tips that you have for this community, especially younger professionals, on how to navigate the workplace virtually?
So for that, I would definitely say, not to like take it back, but I think you have to do what's best for you and your communication style. So for me, I'm a very blunt, upfront person. I recognize some people may not take it well, and I prepare myself to deal with that. But I actually had an incident where a colleague suggested that rather than non-Black people go and read books and watch all these documentaries, she said, go out into the real world and meet Black people and be their friend. And another person tried to reiterate it, but instead of using the term Black, she said people of color. And I just let the person know straight up, no, she said Black people. So like for me, I'm a pretty straight up person. If I see someone petty, like touching some Black person hair, like I tell them straight up, they're not an animal, like, that's rude. But that's my approach. I'm really straight up. If I hear someone say something, I'll be like, that's a microaggression, right? Oh, you don't know what that is? Let me let you know. So that's my approach because I'm a pretty direct person, whether it's in the office or not. But I also recognize I have a sense of privilege in the spaces that I have worked where I am able to do that. So I would say if you do not have that privilege, I would definitely say just talking to someone one-on-one and like pulling them to the side where they won't get embarrassed and you're able to talk freely with them without having the presence of outside people. I would just say having that direct dialogue and letting them know why what they said or what they did is a microaggression and the impact of it. And I do realize that a lot of the time do not know the history behind some of the everyday phrases and actions that are made. they don't know the history of it. So it's why a lot of times people are perpetuating these microaggressions. So sometimes it is just educating them and letting them know.
Andrea, I am going to read out the next question.
Okay.
We have an anonymous attendee that wrote in and shared, I have reached out to the assistance department within my local firm 3 times asking for a therapist. And from the long list they provided me, only one person returned my call and stated that they did not have any openings, which is very disheartening. Venetia, can you speak to any resources for this specific individual?
Yes, so I believe at the end of the presentation, there's going to be shared. And so I'm just gonna hope, anonymous attendee, that you are local within the Bay Area. But within the Bay Area, there are a lot of organizations that are actually providing care and offering sessions. And also during this time, because of the shelter in place, there are a lot of other outside organizations that are also providing therapeutic services. So a simple Google search of, what do they call it? Remote therapy, I think it is. And you can say like California behind it. Ideally, you will want someone who's licensed in the state that you're located, simply because practice vary by state. But there's a lot of people who are also providing access to remote therapeutic services. But the spreadsheet that will be shared at the end, there's a list of Bay Area clinicians, all of which are of African descent, who provide therapeutic services. And many they practice through private practice, which sometimes gives a little bit more flexibility for people looking for services. And there's also a list of culturally relevant resources that provide access to a few online services that also provide therapy. But in regards to the, I don't want to say incompetence, but the shortcoming of your employee assistance, each company, the bureaucracy is a little bit different, but I would definitely just casually ask someone in the office, what do you do when they're not able to meet your needs? Because if that is something that you're entitled to, sometimes they can aid you in still obtaining that resource outside of the company. So I would definitely just ask, maybe not pointing any fingers or saying who, but I would just ask maybe someone in HR or associated with employee assistance, what do you guys do when employee assistance is not able to meet your needs?
As a follow-up to the anonymous attendee, there are representatives on the attending the session from your firm. I will share this information with them directly.
Thank you.
The last question that I have is also from Nicole Felix, and it was just kind of touching on what you just spoke about, but just can you remind people to consider their employee assistant programs for support as well?
Yeah, so I definitely do encourage people to seek out their employee assistance program because it is something that you're entitled to as an employee. But the quality of the employee assistance program, it definitely varies by company and things like that. So that's also why I say just ask. And in the case that they're not able to meet your needs, find out what else can be done. Because it may be like the anonymous person said, where they have access to therapeutic services, but maybe everyone is full, or maybe you can't even get access to the list of therapists that are available through EAP. So I do encourage people to take advantage of it and to ask those questions. Like when you were hired, I know most companies give you the packet and they tell you, oh yeah, don't forget about EAP. Tap into it and to see, like hold them accountable, I would say. Like you guys told us about this, so what can I do with it? What do you guys offer? Take advantage of it. But I also know that in some work environments, some employees are, I don't want to say punished or shunned, but some supervisors will interpret your use of EAP as it may threaten your ability to do your job. So again, with that, I say advocate and just be aware of your rights, and to not allow anyone to ever shame you or make you feel bad for seeking the help that you may need or the support that you may need. Because I have heard in some organizations where people, if they go to EAP, everyone just assume like, oh, you're just going through the worst, and are you going to be able to perform and things like that. And I feel like that also just goes back to that negative perception that there is about mental health. And no one says that, you know, you're bad when you go on a diet. Like, we're not shunning, you know, your health, or when you go get a checkup or you go get the physical. So I feel like the same needs to be said in regards to mental health, because a lot of times seeking out these resources is preventative. It prevents you from getting to the place where you're not able to do your job. So I do encourage, utilize your EAP, ask questions, and to see what they have to offer you.
Thank you so much. So that was the last question I had in the Q&A section, but if there are any other questions, please feel free to post them now.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Venetia. So to the attendees, this is the Bay Area Black resource list that Venetia mentioned. This resource list is provided via a living Google spreadsheet. What that means is this spreadsheet is constantly being updated. So if you provide me with a second, I will share with you what this document looks like. All right, here it is. So again, this is a Google document, a Google sheet. You will have view-only access. The first tab is a list of Bay Area clinician resources. So you have a list of about 70, I think is what I saw listed. The second tab is a list of local and culturally relevant resources. So these are also individuals as well as organizations that can provide you with support. If you are a clinician or an organization that would like to be listed or included within this list, here in row 4, it says, thank you for contributing to this essential resource. If you would like to be added, click here. And then it shares with you who the document was created by. All of you will receive a link to this Google document via the survey that will be provided to all attendees following the session. So you will have this for future reference. All right, give me a second to get us back to the PowerPoint. All right, so up next, so for the NABA San Francisco chapter, what we have next is our scholarship, our annual scholarship program. Even though COVID tried to take us out, we said, no way, not today, COVID. We still felt that it was important for us to honor the scholastic achievements and the tenacity that our students have demonstrated, given that they have still continued their studies amid the COVID-19 pandemic. With that said, NABA San Francisco has provided more than $700,000 in scholarships. I myself am a NABA SF scholarship recipient, as well as 4 of our current NABA SF board members and many of the NABA SF professional members that are joining or are attending the session currently. At this time, on behalf of our chapter, I would like to say thank you. Thank you to Venetia Curd for your time, your expertise, for sharing with us, our membership, and the larger public and the audience and community about the importance of mental health, and for reiterating that even though it may have been seen as a taboo in the past, it's time for us to change that narrative. It's time for us to take the steps to ensure our own well-being, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So again, thank you, Venetia. This event was sponsored by one of our longtime corporate sponsors, Kaiser Permanente. Thank you so much for your continued support. We really appreciate you. And to all of our NABA student and professional members, past presidents, past national presidents, and our lifetime members, it is because of all of you that we, NABA SF, can continue on our mission of lifting as we climb. Advancing careers, building relationships, creating opportunities, and developing people. That's what NABA SF is all about. We are NABA SF, and we invite you to join us in the advancement of Black professionals. To learn more about our organization, feel free to check out our website, www.nabachapters.org/San Francisco. Thank you all for your time. We hope you found the session very informative. The session has been recorded and will be available to everyone that registered 2 days after the official session. Again, thank you and have a good evening. Bye.